Thank you for the heads up. We're in the Maimer Va'ata Tetzaveh. We're holding chapter 7. What we said to this point was that the Moses of every generation, Moshe Rabbeinu, the role of the leader of the generation is to nurture the faith of the people. And by nurture the faith of the people, we don't just mean, as we understood it initially, just that they cause the people to live their lives in accordance with their faith, so that the faith becomes something internalized, but that the fact that the faith is internalized is a sign that they're not just feeding them faith, as it were, but they're actually causing the people to access or revealing within the people a higher level of faith. A faith that is meaningful and personal. How is that? So we explained that the fact that we have faith stems from two things. One thing is that the soul sees God and sees godliness, and therefore it doesn't need any proof of God, and will cause the person down here to have a faith in God. But there, the faith that one has, the experience of seeing godliness, even comes down in a very limited, sort of subliminal way into the conscious self. But ultimately, it's two separate things. There's the person and there's God, and so you live with that faith in God, but that doesn't really affect you in a very personal, meaningful way, because it's still something outside of you. I'm sorry? That's one thing.
God and a person is one thing.
No. One level is that they're two separate. There's the soul and there's God. That's two separate things. But then there's that's the second thing, which is that the essence of the soul is a part of God and feels that connection being a part of God's essence. That higher level of faith, or that higher experience, that higher connection, is the essence of every part of the soul. So it's not just that you have the soul as it's in the body, then you have the soul as it's in heaven, the part of that soul that's in heaven, and then that soul sees, and that part of the soul sees God. But the essence of every single part of the soul, the part in heaven, the part in the body, every part of it, its essence is godliness, is God. And so when Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moses reveals the essence of the soul within the people, so automatically it becomes something that's internalized, something that becomes impactful on the person and transformative. So and we discussed that there's what the role of Moshe Rabbeinu. We discuss often as soon as the idea that Moshe is the one who nurtures the faith of the people in the way of das. He's mashpia das liYisrael. Meaning, what's das? Das is the intellectual capacity to anchor that which is beyond with yourself. And so Moshe Rabbeinu connects he by exposing the essence of the soul, the people reach this level of das, where that faith becomes das-like, meaning it matures the person and transforms the person. So the idea that your faith can be transformative in your life is a sign that what faith are we dealing with here? The higher level of faith, the one that is the essence of. That's why it can come into the person in a meaningful, personal, and impactful way, because it's not an abstract faith; it's the essence of the part of the soul that's within the person. So the idea that the people of the generation of Moses, generation of the desert, were called the Dur Deya, they were people of Das, meant that Moshe was successful in revealing within his people, revealing that higher level of faith. But that's just sort of a proof that how is it that if you see a person living his life in accordance with his faith, so you know that what level of faith is he accessing? He's accessing that higher level of faith. But then there's an expression of that faith itself. There's an expression of the essence of the soul. And what is that? That's self-sacrifice. Self-sacrifice is not a proof of you living in accordance with the higher level of faith, with the essence, but it's an expression of the essence. That's what causes a person to be willing to sacrifice, to give their very lives, is because and that's what we discussed in the last class, is that you can have an awareness of something, a knowledge of something that can be very real to you, and you're even willing to die for it. But it's a conscious decision that you make. You believe in something so strongly, this is so important to you, it's meaningful, that you're willing to give your life for it. But it's not automatic. it's a decision that you have to sort of make in your own mind, and you can make that decision. That's what we're saying. So when we say that a person is willing to give his life, what we're saying is not that he chooses to give his life, that he comes to a reasonable conclusion that this is worth giving my life for. But the contrary, the reason he gives his life is because he can't not. It's because it's who he is. So self-sacrifice is the essence of the soul in action. Since it's the essence of the soul, since God is the essence of the person, so therefore he can't not give his life. Right? So the difference between the generation of Moses versus the generation of Mordechai, the one we've been talking about, is that in Moshe's generation, we simply have verification that Moshe was successful in stimulating the higher level of faith, was that his people were people that lived informed by that awareness. But in the times of Mordechai, in the times of Purim, when the people were actually brought to a self-sacrifice, where they were giving their lives, they were putting their lives on the line for it, that was the essence of the soul in action.
They weren't forced. Can we say they couldn't think of
we didn't get to. We'll get there. We didn't get there yet. Okay. So that's what we said up till now. Now chapter 7. Chapter 7, the Rebbe points out that why is it the previous Rebbe singles out Mordechai of all the Jewish heroes in the past? Why specifically Mordechai? Because he's pointing out that Mordechai is the undisputed Moses of his generation. This idea that Mordechai is the undisputed Moses of his generation is why we single out Mordechai. That Mordechai was the Moses of his generation, and he was so successful in bringing his entire people to that awareness. Okay, let's see chapter 7. V'hinei Yedua. It's known that when was it in history that we had the entire people, all of Israel, brought to a level of self-sacrifice? It was in the time of Purim. Bisman Gzeres Haman, in the time of the decree of Haman. The self-sacrifice of the Jews during the time of Chanukah, during the time of the Greek persecution, was primarily by Matisyahu and his children, by the Maccabees. It wasn't the entire Jewish people. In fact, it was probably even a minority. But in the times of Haman, the times of Purim, the self-sacrifice was all Jews, everybody. As we quoted last time from the Alter Rebbe in Torah, where he says that not a single person entertained the thought of renouncing their faith, not a single one. And now we can understand why in his Maimer the previous Rebbe singles out Mordechai and says that Mordechai in his generation was like Moshe in his generation. He's addressing the fact, why is it that the Medrash chooses of all the Jewish heroes and leaders to single out Mordechai? That Mordechai was the one that was like Moshe. Why? So we can say that one of the things that was unique about Mordechai versus other Jewish leaders is that Mordechai was the undisputed open leader of all the Jews, meaning that he was the undisputed leader of the Jewish people at the time, and also that he was able to impact everybody. He influenced every single Jew. Similar to Moshe Rabbeinu, who brought the faith to the people in a way of das, meaning that he anchored their faith into their conscious selves. So we see that Moshe's whole generation is called the Dardei, a generation of das, meaning a generation where that faith impacted them. That's the whole generation, meaning that Moshe was not only the undisputed leader of his entire generation, but he also impacted every last person in his generation. The whole generation is called the Dardei. His impact was felt on everybody. And the same thing is true about Mordechai. That Mordechai's impact was felt everybody. If everybody was brought to that level of Mesiras Nefesh, of self-sacrifice, that means that Mordechai was successful in reaching and impacting every single Jew. Yep. So what's the difference then between Moshe and Mordechai? In Moshe, we find that he nurtured the faith of the people, and that was expressed in das, in that the faith impacted them, transformed them. And in Mordechai, it was through the fact that he brought the people to a level of self-sacrifice.
Which is what level as well.
That is the essence of the soul in action. So we asked, initially we had asked earlier in the Maimer, we said in his Maimer, the Friedrich Rebbe is talking about Moshe, that Moshe, the faithful shepherd, he nurtures the faith of the people and causes them to internalize that faith. So it's not abstract. And then he said that Mordechai brought his people to Mesiras Nefesh. So he said, what's the
first step in Mordechai versus second step?
Yeah. So we initially asked, well, what's the connection? Moshe nurtured faith. Mordechai brought them to self-sacrifice. What's the connection? So now we can explain both the fact that it's the same idea. They did the same thing, just it was expressed in different ways, and also the fact that why Mordechai is the one that's singled out, because he's similar to Moshe in that way, in that he was the undisputed leader of his people and affected all the people just like Moshe. But we see it's the same thing. That's what we've already explained, that it's by Moshe Rabbeinu, both of them, Mordechai and Moshe, and so too is true of all subsequent Jewish leaders, their primary role is to reveal the essence of the soul within the people. And how is that expressed? So by Moshe it was expressed through das, the idea that it matured the people, it transformed the people. It was internalized, because as we said, faith normally is not something that could be internalized. It remains abstract. That's its lane that it's in. But the essence of the soul is not confined to being aloof or transcendent. It's the essence of every part of the soul, both the transcendent and the personal internal. And so that's how we see that Moshe stimulated the essence of faith, the essence of the soul. And the same thing is with Mordechai. What brings the people, what leads them to Mesiras Nefesh, is exposing the essence, revealing the essence of the soul. So they did the same thing. The fact that in his Maimer, the previous Rebbe quotes the Medrash that Mordechai in his generation was equal to Moshe in his generation, even though that doesn't seem necessary for the point he was trying to make. But he adds this quote. It's like, so through this, the author of the discourse, meaning the Rebbe is referring to the previous Rebbe, ruled about himself, that he is the apparent leader, the revealed leader of his entire generation. I mean, it seemed the fact that the Friedrich Rebbe adds in his Maimer. So the Rebbe is pointing out, why would he add it in his Maimer? So that's what he says, Pasuk Alatzman. Why is the Rebbe adding it in this Maimer? So, yeah, okay. So let's look at note 40. This idea that the Baal Maimer is Pasuk Esadin Alatzmai. He ruled on himself. So look at note 40. Al derech hapirish b'lashon HaMishnah, similar to the commentary on the Mishnah, Din v'cheshbon. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos that you should know before whom you're going to give a din v'cheshbon, a ruling and an accounting. First din v'achar cheshbon. So what's the it seems to be out of sequence. When you go to court, so we're talking about you want to stay in line. Know who you're going to have to face eventually. You're going to have to face the music. You're going to have to give. You're going to have to defend and justify your act, your behavior, your life. So it should say cheshbon v'din. First, there's a trial, and then there's a ruling. You don't have a ruling and then a trial. First, there's a trial, a cheshbon, an accounting, a court case, and you lay out your arguments, and then you have the verdict and the ruling and the verdict. But the Mishnah says din v'cheshbon. First the verdict, first the ruling, and then the case, then the trial. So why is that? So you can explain it. Al pi divrei HaMishnah, based on another Mishnah, also in Pirkei Avos, that a person is the verdict is passed on him. He's repaid both midaitoi, both with his knowing and without shalei midaitoi, and without his knowing. After a person rules on with his own comes to his own determination on somebody else, that causes him to then rule as well on himself without his awareness. So this is the Baal Shem Tov explains. What does it mean that a person is paid both midaitoi, with his awareness and without his awareness? What does that mean? So he says, so Hashem explains that when a person comes up to heaven, so he's shown a scenario, and he's told, we want you to judge. What do you think the ruling in this scenario should be? What should be done with this person? And the person gives a ruling, not realize, and so he makes his decision, he thinks about it, and he comes to a determination, he decides this is what should be done. And then he's told, you just ruled on yourself. That what you just saw, the scenario that just played out before you, was actually your own experience. And so first you're quick to, it tells us a lot about not judging other people, right? That, if you knew that you're looking at yourself, you would work much harder. Yeah, you might come to a different conclusion. You'd be working overtime to figure out how to. But when it's talking about somebody else, you're disconnected from it. You'll rule, maybe a little bit more hastily, and maybe you'll be a little bit more, a little bit less tolerant of the person. So you have to be aware of that. Whenever you pass judgment, you're passing judgment on yourself. So you're passing judgment on somebody else. You think, in your own way, midaitai, without awareness, but actually, shalom midaitai, unbeknownst to you, you're actually passing judgment on yourself. So the same idea is with din v'cheshbon. Once you pass that judgment on somebody else, now we're given the cheshbon. Now suddenly accounting comes and we're said, oh, actually, what you just ruled on, that's your own case. That's exactly your own scenario, and that's where. Okay, so the point is that the previous Rebbe, when he's passing judgment on Mordechai by saying that Mordechai was Moshe of his generation, so sort of not unwittingly, but in a backhanded way, unbeknownst in a sense to him, he was actually passing judgment on himself as well. Once he passed judgment on somebody else, he was actually passing on himself. In this case, it was a very positive judgment that he was passing on somebody else. Okay, chapter 8. So we've. The question that was on the table was, what's the sequence of in the Maimer? What's the sequence here? He starts by talking about Moshe being a Raim and a nurturing faith. Then he says that Mordechai nurtures the faith of his people, brings them to self-sacrifice. Then we said Kosis Lamor, you reach the essence. So what was the sequence? And now we can understand the sequence. Let's look chapter 8. Now we can understand the connection. And between these different, seemingly different ideas, and also the sequence in the Maimer, Bebir Apostle V'Ate Tetzaveh, in explaining the verse of V'Ate Tetzaveh. First, he starts out by explaining the explanation of the opening words of the verse, that V'Ate Tetzaveh is B'nei Yisrael, that you should command. But what does it mean? Shemoshe Mekasher, not that he commands, but he connects. Umechaber, as B'nei Yisrael, that he connects the people with God. How is that done? How do you connect? Through nurturing their faith. Right, by revealing the higher faith, the essence. Then he explains what we initially thought was a separate thing. Moshe is nurturing faith, and Mordechai is bringing his people to Mesiras Nefesh, to self-sacrifice. So he says no. We start off by explaining Moshe is the one who nurtures the faith, meaning, as we said by Moshe, it's Malamed Das, he nurtures that faith that should come. It should be internalized. Then he goes from Moshe by connecting the people by revealing the essence. The same is true with regards to the Moshe of every generation, that he brings the people to a state of Mesiras Nefesh, of self-sacrifice, by doing exactly the same thing. Then he explains the idea of Kosis Lamar, crushed for a luminary. That's in the Pasuk V'Ate Tetzaveh. Shemedaber l'chayr b'Moshe atzmai. The Kosis Lamar is talking about Moshe. That the simple meaning in the verse is an instruction to Moshe to instruct the people to squeeze oil to bring to him. So what's Kosis Lamor, crushed for luminary, which we're talking about the oil that's brought for illumination in the temple and for lighting the menorah? What does that have to do with Mordechai generations later? So Kizesh Moshe Megal B'chinas Hamor Di Yisrael Atzman Neshama Hu Beikar Al Yidei Spashtus Edelei Shebizman Hagolus Kosis Sha'eru B'Yisrael Kach HaMesiras Nefesh Alehem Sha'yidei Zeh Hu Ikar Gilei Atzman Neshama Mor. Because we're trying to explain the pasuk, the verse V'Ate Tetzaveh is trying to tell us what Moshe is all about. What is he about? He's about revealing the essence of the soul within his people. Where do we see that? Not so much by Moshe himself. Moshe's generation didn't need self-sacrifice. We saw it primarily by the Moshe of later generations. And that's why the verse is telling us, you want to know what Moshe does? He's Tetzaveh B'nei Yisrael. He connects the people by revealing the essence. And where do we see that? We see it in Kosis Lamor. We see it in the time of exile, the time of challenges. When the people require Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, that's when we see the impact of Moshe Rabbeinu most clearly. Because the primary expression of the essence of the soul is through self-sacrifice. That's how we reach Ma'or, the source, the essence. So, so seemingly we've addressed the problem, the question on the table, which was we see a bunch of different ideas. There's Moshe nurturing faith. There's Mordechai bringing his people to self-sacrifice. There's the idea of persecution and self-sacrifice. None of these things seem to be connected. And now we explained that sequence very well. But we're still missing one point. There's one link that's missing. And that is that in the verse, if you go back to the verse, V'ata Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael, so if the verse would have said, Moshe, you command the people, or connect, as we're explaining, you connect the people, for Zayizach Kasis Lamar, that they reach the state of Ma'or, of essence, through Kasis, through having to reach a level of Mesiras Nefesh at the time of Kasis, of persecution. How is that? How do they reach that level? It's Moshe, by Moshe doing his thing. Then in a time of Kasis, in time of persecution, Ma'or, we expose the essence of the soul, which is what Moshe is all about, and that would be fine. But the point is, the problem is that there's some words in the middle over there that we still haven't addressed, which is V'yikoi lecha. They should bring to Moshe, and we explain what does it mean V'yikoi lecha, that they should bring the oil to Moshe. Moshe is not the one who needs the oil. What did we say? That V'yikoi lecha means that Moshe is enhanced through his role in nurturing the faith of the people. As we quoted from last week's parsha, actually. The Sheish Meis Elef Ragli, that Moshe compares the people to his feet, and as we explained, just as you have a head and feet. So the head is the one who dominates, controls. He's the one who controls the body. And yet the head, even though it's superior to the feet, needs the feet. The feet can take the head to where it wants to go. So the feet impact the head as well. So similarly, we said, V'yichoi lecha is that Moshe, through Moshe doing his job, fulfilling his role, and nurturing the people, through that V'yichoi lecha, the feet take him to where he needs to be. So what does this have to do with what we're talking about? And not only what does it have to do with what we're talking about, but it's injected in the middle. It would make more sense to say, if whatever the explanation might be, we could say, V'ata Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael, you connect the people, and through that is Kasis Lamar, they can reach the essence, and because of Kasis Lamar, then V'yichoi lecha. After you did your job, then you end up, we'd have to still understand it, but that here it's in the middle. Before we get to the fact that he brings the people to Mesiras Nefesh, to self-sacrifice, the expression of the essence of the soul in action, where we see clearly Moshe's impact. Before we get there, we're saying the V'yichoi lecha, the Moshe is enhanced as a result of it. So what's that have to do with anything? Let's see it inside. So we have to understand the Lefi Bir Hanal, based on the explanation we just gave in the Kasis Lamor, Shaykh Levata Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael. The idea of Kasis Lamor, that through persecution and reaching a level of self-sacrifice, we reach the essence, we're exposing the essence of the soul, that's connected directly with V'ata Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael, meaning the fact that Moshe and the subsequent Moshes of every generation connect the people with God. With the essence of God, the essence of the soul, the essence of God. But in the verse, Kasis Lamor, this idea, the expression of the essence of the soul, comes after saying that the inyan V'yichoi lecha, this idea of V'yichoi lecha, as we said, that the people bring oil to Moshe, that's the idea that they increase the light Moshe, meaning that they bring Moshe to a higher level. That Moshe's level is enhanced as a result of the people. So what's the...
What is the end of Tetzaveh?
What
is the end of the placement?
What is the idea that... how is it that the people enhancing Moshe, why is that injected in the middle? How does that fit into the sequence? So we've explained that Moshe connects the people with God. And by connecting people to God, we explained what does it mean. We also gave a new interpretation in the Zohar we quoted earlier, that Moshe nurtures the faith. Elsewhere we say, what does it mean nurtures faith? That he sort of feeds us faith. He nurtures us with faith, with our faith. Takes our faith and he feeds us the faith, so he internalizes faith. In the Maimer here, the Rebbe is explaining that it's not just that he's feeding us our faith. He's actually accessing a higher level of faith. So it's the faith itself that's higher. He's nurturing the faith itself, meaning that he's exposing, revealing the higher level, the essence of the soul that's essentially bound with God. So that's V'ata Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael. How do we see that happens? That he connects the people by revealing the higher level of faith? It's through Kasis Lamor. It's when the people are brought to a state of self-sacrifice, which, as we've explained a few times already, the idea that they have no choice. That's an expression of the essence of the soul. That's only due to the essence of the soul. So that seems to be a direct result of Tetzaveh, Moshe nurturing the faith, and through that the people reaching Ma'or, the source, meaning the essence of the soul, through in a time of Kasis, where we reveal that idea that we need Mesiras Nefesh, we need self-sacrifice, and at that time we have an expression of that higher level of faith. But in the middle, he says that Moshe is enhanced as a result. And it comes before we even get to the conclusion, before we get to the part that the people reach a state of Mesiras Nefesh. We're explaining before that, we're pointing out that Moshe is enhanced through the people. So how does that fit in? How does that fit into the sequence here? How is that idea necessary how does that bridge us from point A, which is the Moshe nurtures the faith, to point B, which is the result, the conclusion of that, which is self-sacrifice? Okay. How are we doing on time?
9:05.
Okay, so let's start chapter 9. Okay, so that's what we have to move on to explain. And this is where we start getting a little bit, remember, that's getting a lot deeper. Okay, chapter 9. The verse V'kibel Yehudim, the title verse of the previous Rebbe's Maimer that we keep referencing. So that verse V'kibel Yehudim Eser Sheichelu Lasis, in the Megillah it says that the people accepted upon themselves what they began earlier, and as we explained in Chassidus, that V'kibel Yehudim Eser Sheichelu Lasis, meaning that they accepted and they ratified in times of Purim what they began at Mount Sinai. Eser Sheichelu Lasis, what they began when at Mount Sinai. This, we noted earlier, is slightly different from the Gemara. It seems to be exactly the same. Just the Gemara says it on the verse V'kimu V'kiblu HaYehudim, and Chassidus talks about V'kiblu HaYehudim. So two different verses, seemingly making the same point. So we noted that they seem to be different, but there's something else, which is in the idea that V'kiblu HaYehudim what we're talking about. We're explaining in the Maimer. We've been explaining that they accept upon themselves when. During the time of the decree. That at the time of the decree, that's when they had self-sacrifice, that they could have been exempt from the decree by renouncing their faith. Haman only decreed that Yehudim are marked for extinction and extermination. Yehudim, what are Yehudim? Yehudim are people that deny idolatry and profess their faith in God, in the one God. So if you were no longer a Yehudi, if you could, you're right. It didn't include you, and yet nobody accepted that. Nobody entertained that thought of renouncing their faith in God. That was the self-sacrifice. So when did that happen? That happened in the time of the decree. But kimu v'kibla Yehudim, or even v'kibla Yehudim, what's the verse referring to? It's not referring to the time of the decree. It's referring to the time afterwards. The simple meaning of the verse is that they accept after the story of Haman, and after the decree had been abolished, and after the big salvation, and the people were saved, and they had the whole story of Purim, and they were able to fight off their enemies successfully. Then Mordechai and Esther establish a holiday called Purim, and the people accept the holiday. When did they accept it? After the story, not during the threat. So we've been explaining what's going on during the threat. That's how Chassidus discusses it. But the verse itself in the Gemara is talking about afterwards. So how does that fit? So seemingly, what we're talking about is what happened afterwards. So the Rebbe says like this: who should be made Achashverosh kiblu ma sheichelu b'matan Torah hu gam lefi pashtus hakasav shevekibul hagomer hoyel achrei enes. So we can say that what's explained in the Maimer that about they accepting upon themselves, which we're saying is during the time of the decree, during the time of the threat, also fits with with the simple meaning of the verse, which is that it actually happened after the miracle. As we'll explain. So if in Chassidus we're saying that they accepted it upon themselves during the decree, but simply the meaning is that they accepted it after the decree. So when was it? So the Rebbe says, obviously there are two stages of this acceptance. The V'kibel HaYehudim, the acceptance happened in two stages. There's what they experienced during the decree and what happened afterwards. And so like that, everything fits nicely. There's the acceptance, the Kabbalah that happened during the time of the decree, as explained in the discourse in the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer, which is what the self-sacrifice during the threat. And then there's the Purim. Then there's what they accepted after the miracle, which is the simple meaning of the verse, which was actually a higher acceptance than what they accepted during the threat. You would think, And we're going to explain. We're going to stop here, but we'll continue the next class. We'll continue. Leave it for a second. We'll continue in the next class to explain this. But what's the Rebbe saying here? That there's two stages. It happened in two stages. There's the acceptance during the decree and the acceptance afterwards.
The first stage is the one we've been talking about.
The first one's the one we've been talking about. What happened during the decree, the self-sacrifice. Now, if you had to choose, which one would be a higher level? The one where people withstood the temptation to renounce the faith and save their lives, or after there's no more threat. There's no more threat, and now now it's easy to be Jewish suddenly. When it was the threat to being Jewish, then that was difficult. People didn't renounce. And now when everybody wanted, Mordechai is popular and there's no more threat. Now where suddenly everybody's proclaiming their faith in God. Which one seems to be more impressive? The first one. And yet the Rebbe says the second one's actually higher. Why must he say the second one's higher? Because if the first one's higher, you wouldn't need the second one. If during the time of the threat, the people were brought to Mesiras Nefesh, and that was a higher level of acceptance of commitment to God, then why would you need a second commitment afterwards? It's already included in the first one. If we've committed to God in a time of difficulty, so why do we need to reaffirm that commitment in a time when everything's great, in a time of prosperity?
It still feels like the first one's higher.
It does still feel like the first one's higher. No, we didn't explain why, but the Rebbe is saying that we have to say the second one's higher, because if it isn't, then why would they have to ratify it? And not only that, really, the only acceptance that the Gemara talks about, that the verse seems to be talking about, is really only the second one anyway. It's only in a Maimer where we're discussing the first one. So it's really the second one that we're making a big deal about. So clearly the second one is greater. The question would be why, and that will explain Mitzvah Shem in the next class.